I can stand behind. So by creating my ideology from scratch, this is the way that I find I want to do it. This is the way that I've... Kill me. Good evening and welcome back to Nihilists in Denial. We've got the fundamental assumptions this evening that we are going to churn through. They're kind of the foundational axioms that I've put together in order to frame my magnum opus. The fundamental assumptions are essentially my central axioms upon which I will lay everything I know and think. Given it may change, there may be some drastic changes behind what I think about this and the way that I approach that, yet I think I have some things that are foundational to some extent and that I actually genuinely really enjoy. It's difficult when you're recreating your entire belief system. This was probably the hardest piece so far. Of all the research that I've done, of all the studying and work on different people and historical events and reasoning, this was by far the hardest because it's so abstract. Intensely abstract. You've got zero, nothing. What can you believe? What can you think? And it seems self-evident because we take a lot of things for granted or for law, like, I exist. I don't have to substantiate that, but I exist. So we don't go that extra mile, generally speaking, by looking at those things, those very, very central and base portions of our beliefs. They aren't fleshed out. So where do we start? While researching some different philosophers, I came across René Descartes, and many people know René Descartes not by his name or most of his work for that matter, but simply by something that was found in his second meditation. And it was, I think, therefore I am. With that goes a lot of reasoning as to why he knows that or believes that that's the case, and that's why he can trust that he exists. But for some reason, that is the only singular, bare-bone piece of his work that we take. That is my first assumption. I exist. I am material and I exist. I am here. Why? Why can I assert that? From what I can glean, I am presented with more evidence that I exist than I do not. The world is consistent, in my view. And I don't mean like in my view, I mean from my perspective, as I'm experiencing the world, it is consistent. I sleep, I wake up, I have my day, I interact with people, language, thoughts, experiences, consistency. Within this experience that I'm having, there are parameters and limitations and things that I can demonstrate over and over again by, for example, dropping a pen. I'll know that it drops because I've dropped a pen before and I've seen other things drop, and I can make that estimate. If I were nothingness, we have nothing and something, or just nothing. If nothing could create something and I came out of nothing and did something or thought something or said something, had some sort of experience, I am now replacing that nothingness with somethingness. So regardless of whether I came from nothing, I am here now because I'm having the experience, I'm having the thought, and it places me in the world where I can interact with it, and it's consistent. So that's maybe the best reasoning I can give for why I think that I exist. I believe that I exist, and I believe that I somewhat have to believe that I exist to go any further, because otherwise, now what? Who cares? There's nowhere else for me to go after I say I don't exist. It doesn't matter. We don't subscribe to that. So where do we go from there? The secondary assumption would be we accept that with this existence, we are able to contemplate things. We are able to take in information and be rational to some extent. If we take objectivity as it is, something that is transcended beyond me, removed from my singular reality or deluded interpretation of the world, whatever objective being or thing that is, probably understands objective truth. I don't, because I don't have the scope for objectivity, but because I have a singular dimension with which to work, which is myself, I need to rely on the tools that I have available to me, which would be me and my experience and the experiences of those around me to kind of help color that. So we're dealing with humanity, our singular perspectives, and the collective dealing with their own singular perspectives and working together, versus a potential objective being, omnipotent, omniscient, what have you, removed from our restraint or restraints or our bounds. So we deal with us. 1, we exist. 2, we deal with what we can deal with, which is us. 3, human value. We put stock into the fact that we matter. The way to prove that, because part of this, again, nihilists in denial, I want to remove that. We assume that we are worth something for good reason. Because even if at the end of the day, even if if it's all said and done, you close your eyes and it's over. There's nothing else. There is blackness, darkness, and you're screwed. And you can reduce your life to simply you suffer and then you die and then it's eternal nothingness, just like it was eternal nothingness prior. You know, even if that's the case, in my mind, some value can be found in the temporary existence that you have. Your existence is temporary, I think, or at least it might be. And if it is, why make it so temporarily terrible? And why not pass that to the next temporary life, however futile and insignificant that is, so that they can have a proper and good temporary existence on Earth? So we have value. There are good experiences. We have good experiences. And part of where we put our value in is not only just existence, which existence has value, our existence has value, but it is extended beyond that with the quality of the existence that is there. Good life, bad life, both have the inherent value of humanity. But the one with a good life, one that does something, lasting or fulfilling or both, is much more profound, and I like that measurement. So humans have value. We put value in our experience and our quality of our existence, and we trust that that is true. That no matter how small that value is on a grand objective scale, which again we're not dealing with because we can't, it is big to us and can be immense to us. So I want to maintain that. Maintain the fact that we have value. We are good, have the capacity to be good, and that's how we are. Now, part of what goes with this assumption is we have to determine that our value, our human value and goodness has the capacity to outweighs or has the capacity to outweigh our negative influence. Because if we are just a cancer on the face of the earth, we are absolutely useless to everyone. I don't like that way of thinking. But If that's the case, that we are just this cancer and cause nothing but misery and pain, how can we justify our own self-advocacy? We can't. We cannot justify self-advocacy if we agree that we are a net negative and don't have the capacity to be anything else. We are valuable. We put stock into human experience and the quality of it. And we have the capacity to extend beyond purely causing suffering and misery. So, if human life is good, there are things about human life that are good. If it is good, if there are things about your life and your existence and the things that you do that are good, it has to be comparative in some sense, because good means that it is ranked, hierarchically speaking, above something else. You need something to offset good, something that is worse or not as good. So, arguably, it puts what one would call good and bad within kind of a scalar domain. So essentially, those are my axioms, assumptions. Yet, I wanted to make sure that I defined what I'm attempting to do, because I know I said I'm trying to find truth, which I know I won't find. So, what does it mean to pursue truth? And what is truth? We ask the following question. Does truth have to be objective in order to be truth? Or is truth relative to the individual and their experience? If the latter is the case, someone's perspective is uncompromisingly true, but true only to that individual. But whatever deluded realm that you live in is true. Like, that experience and that interpretation is true. The way you are existing is true, but from your singular perspective. So we dispense with that because that's useless. It means everyone is living an exact truth. It's just their own truth. We dispense with that and we say, to move forward, we have to assume that there is the possibility of an objective truth that isn't relative to the individual. That is hard. Because, the fact that we assume that we exist, and we haven't even talked about assuming that you exist, or anyone else for that matter, that's a difficult thing to say, that we actually have two deluded interpretations of the world trying to move towards something approximating objectivity. Maybe you can get something that's probability-wise closer to what truth looks like. You can't do an absolute. Generally speaking, I don't think we have the tools or the scope or the reach or the ability. It's not in the cards. So, to reiterate, first, I exist. I have the capacity to attempt these complex issues because I am working with myself, my own interpretation of the world, to filter out some sort of rationality that I can use, because the universe or whatever higher being, what have you, if they're objective, I can't understand them and can't deal with them. So I remove the things that I can't deal with and I work with what I can. Third, human value has to outweigh our negative influence. We put stock into human value. We are good. We have the capacity to be better than we are worse. And that's the only way we justify ourselves not being absolutely destroyed, because otherwise we're useless, and how do we deserve to be here? So we assume that that's not the case, that we are actually capable of being better as opposed to worse. That means that it's hierarchically valued over something else, so you're comparing it to something that is good. Like, you have a good life versus a bad life. You have those things in the domain of this is good and bad. You have good and bad introduced with that because you are ranking something or some quality or some experience above another. And that doesn't necessarily, it's kind of hard because breaking into good and evil is kind of a different thing, but purely based on human experiences, we can agree to some extent that there are better experiences and worse experiences. So That's a good start. Good is comparative, what have you. And then truth. The truth that we're trying to pursue that we won't achieve is objective truth. Because everyone's own deluded interpretation of the world, if they're living their own truth, it's uncompromisingly true. It's just true only to them, and it's absolutely useless. So we can't deal with that. I mean, I can deal with my own, but that's it. Those are my fundamental axioms or assumptions. They are the foundation of what I intend to build. However, I may revise them. You know, they are not perfect, and they're really abstract. They were much harder to create than one would think, because like it's just so removed from your normal day-to-day way of thinking. Genuinely thinking about the fact that you even exist is kind of a horrifying thought if you actually get into it. Really think about it, that the fact that you're even here is just confounding beyond belief. So yes, those are the fundamental essentials of what I wish to build upon. Next week we will move on to Descartes, because I want to kind of delve more into the abstract existential perspective of why can I trust that I exist, given he's got some serious religious Judeo-Christian influence. But it's okay, because if you can kind of remove that, at least temporarily, we'll come back to Judeo-Christian stuff, but if I can remove that at least temporarily, so that I can look at his work as is, it's actually pretty good, and it works just fine for the most part without God, the assumption of God. It can kind of stand on its own. It's kind of hard because I'm trying to tackle so many subjects at once that I actually think that starting with something that was referenced in my first assumption and looking at him because he's kind of an abstract thinker, it'll be good. It'll be kind of an interesting thing to see. I think it's a good starting spot. It's just there's so much information out there. There's so many people who think in different ways. So that's the slow path to to something larger. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.